It was July 30th, 1989, a day that would forever haunt the rodeo world. The Cheyenne Frontier Days finals were in full swing, and the crowd buzzed with excitement as one of the sport's brightest stars prepared for his next ride. Lane Frost, just 25 years old, was already a legend, a world champion bull rider with a magnetic personality, a fearless heart, and a future that seemed limitless. But no one knew they were about to witness his final ride. Born on October 12, 1963, in Lane, Oklahoma, Frost was raised in the heart of rodeo country. His father, Clyde, was a cowboy himself, and though Lane initially showed little interest in the sport, something changed along the way. The fire inside him ignited, and by the late 80s he had taken the rodeo world by storm. In 1987, he reached the pinnacle of his career, winning the World Championship. The following year, he faced off against the infamous Red Rock, a bucking bull that had never been ridden for the full 8 seconds, until Lane did the impossible. He was more than just a competitor. He was a hero to fans, a friend to fellow riders, and an icon in the making. But fate had other plans. That fateful July day in 1989, the skies over Wyoming were gray, the air thick with the scent of rain-soaked dirt. Lane's opponent, a fierce, unpredictable bull named Taking Care of Business. The gate flew open, and for 8 electrifying seconds Lane danced with danger, gripping the beast with the unshakable confidence that had made him a champion. The crowd erupted as he scored an impressive 85 points. But in rodeo, the ride isn't over when the whistle blows. As Lane dismounted, something went horribly wrong. He landed awkwardly in front of the bull. A heartbeat later, the beast struck. A powerful horn drove into Lane's ribs, and in an instant, the unbreakable cowboy was broken. He staggered to his feet, took a few uncertain steps, then collapsed face first into the Wyoming dirt. The arena fell silent. Dr. Skip Ross, the first responder, rushed to his side. The injuries were catastrophic. Broken ribs had punctured his heart. For 90 agonizing minutes, medical personnel fought to save him, but there was nothing they could do. Lane Frost, the fearless cowboy who had stared down death countless times, was gone. His death sent shockwaves through the rodeo world. His best friends, fellow riders Cody Lambert and Tuff Hademan were shattered. Cody, devastated by the loss, refused to let Lane's death be in vain. He designed the protective vest that is now a standard piece of equipment in bull riding, a life-saving innovation born from tragedy. But Lane's legacy didn't end there. His story inspired a generation. J.B. Mauney, one of the sport's most dominant bull riders, credits Lane as one of his biggest influences. His life was immortalized in the 1994 film 8 Seconds, with Luke Perry portraying him on the big screen, introducing his legend to an even wider audience. Even in death, Lane's presence remains. His mother, Elsie Frost, turned her grief into purpose, distributing the Cowboy Bible in his memory, sharing faith and inspiration with young riders across the country. His nephew, Stetson Frost, built the Lane Frost brand, keeping his name alive in rodeo culture. And the safety measures that exist today, the vests, the helmets, the heightened awareness of just how deadly this sport can be, are all because of Lane's final ride. For those who were there that day, for those who heard the gasp of the crowd and watched a legend fall, the memory of Lane Frost will never fade. His story is one of triumph and tragedy, of a man who lived fearlessly and rode until the very end. And in the heart of every bull rider who steps into the arena, Lane rides on. On December 11, 1994, the Thomas and Mack Center in Las Vegas, Nevada, was electric with anticipation. It was the final night of the National Finals Rodeo, NFR, the ultimate battleground for the world's best bull riders. Among them was Brent Thurman, a 25-year-old rising star, already carving his name into the history of the sport. Thurman wasn't just another cowboy chasing a dream. He was a founding member of the Professional Bull Riders, PBR, and a fierce competitor known for his skill, determination, and love for the sport. But on this night, fate had other plans. As he prepared for his ride, an uncharacteristic unease lingered. He turned to Aaron Samas, a fellow rider who had previously faced the bull he was about to ride. "What do you think of Red Wolf?" he asked, his voice carrying a rare edge of uncertainty. The chute opened. Red Wolf exploded into the arena, bucking with unrelenting force. Thurman held tight, his body instinctively moving with the bull's powerful kicks and twists. The crowd roared as he hit 4 seconds, then 5. He was still in control. Then, everything changed. Thurman was thrown. Most riders know how to take a fall, how to roll away from danger, but this fall was different. His hand became tangled in his bull rope, a deadly mistake. Before he could break free, Red Wolf dragged him beneath its pounding hooves. Then, the fatal moment. 2,000 pounds of fury came crashing down onto the back of Thurman's head and neck. The arena fell silent. For a moment, a flicker of life. He lifted his head, as if trying to fight his way back, but the damage was catastrophic. His body went still. The Justin Sports Medicine team rushed in. EMTs worked frantically, loading him onto a stretcher and rushing him to University Medical Center. But the injuries, severe cranial and facial fractures, were beyond repair. Brent Thurman never regained consciousness. 6 days later, on December 17, 1994, the rodeo world received the devastating news. Brent Thurman was gone. His funeral at the Travis County Exposition Center in Austin, Texas, was a sorrowful gathering of family, friends, and fellow riders who struggled to say goodbye to a man who had once seemed unstoppable. But legends never truly die. Some stories are so unbelievable they sound like something out of a movie. This is one of them. It was a regular Sunday in October 2009, or at least, that's how it started. The heroine of our tale, Kellyanne Walls, a 37-year-old mom from Ross Township, Pennsylvania. She wasn't just an ordinary animal lover. Nope. While most people settle for a dog, maybe a cat or two, Kellyanne went all in. Think lions, tigers, cougars, and a 350-pound black bear named Teddy. For nearly a decade, Teddy wasn't just a pet. He was part of the family. Kellyanne didn't see him as a wild animal. To her, he was just a big, furry buddy who happened to live in a cage out back, and she had cleaned that cage 1,000 times without a single problem. But as fate would have it, October 4th was the day everything changed. That afternoon, Kellyanne grabbed some dog food, her usual trick to keep Teddy occupied while she cleaned. "Here you go, big guy," she might have said, tossing the food to one side of the enclosure. Normally, that was enough to keep him busy. Maybe it was the chill in the air. Maybe it was the fact that hibernation season was around the corner. Or maybe, just maybe, Teddy finally remembered that he was, in fact, a bear. Whatever the reason, something inside him snapped. As Kellyanne stepped into the cage like she had countless times before, Teddy attacked. The scene was nothing short of chaos. Kellyanne's children, frozen in horror, saw the unthinkable unfolding before their eyes. Their mother was in danger, and they did the only thing they could. They ran. As fast as their legs could carry them, they sprinted to their neighbor's house. Enter Scott Caston, local school teacher. When he opened the door to find 2 panicked kids shouting about a bear, he figured a wild one had wandered into town. Without hesitation, he grabbed his .357 caliber handgun and ran toward the Walls property. What he saw when he got there was far worse than he could have imagined. Teddy was still on the attack. Kellyanne lay unconscious, and the bear wasn't done yet. When Teddy turned his attention towards Scott, the neighbor had a choice: stand there and become the bear's next target or act fast. Instinct kicked in. One shot. The bullet struck Teddy, killing him instantly. With the bear down, Scott rushed to Kellyanne's side and called for help, but it was too late. By the time paramedics arrived, there was nothing they could do. Kellyanne was gone. The news rocked the entire community. She had been more than just an animal lover. She was a gentle, kind-hearted woman who had poured her soul into caring for the creatures she adored. Her funeral was filled with friends, neighbors, and heartbroken family members who couldn't believe such a tragedy had unfolded right in their quiet town. But as the mourning continued, so did the questions. Turns out there were warning signs. For starters, Michael Walls, Kellyanne's husband, had let his permits for keeping exotic animals expire over a year earlier, while officials had previously inspected the enclosures and found no safety issues. The Pennsylvania Game Commission had always made one thing clear: wild animals, no matter how loved, can never be truly tamed. And so, Kellyanne's story became a bittersweet lesson. Her passion for animals was undeniable. Her love for Teddy was real. But in the end, love wasn't enough to override nature's instincts. On January 15, 2019, the Denver Coliseum was electric. Fans packed the arena, their voices rising in anticipation as Mason Lowe, one of the top-ranked bull riders in the world, prepared for his next challenge. At just 25 years old, he was no stranger to danger. He had spent years conquering some of the toughest bulls in the sport, but that night, he was about to face a beast that would change everything: hard times. The chute burst open, and the 1,500-pound bull exploded into the arena, twisting and bucking with relentless fury. Mason held on with the skill and determination that had earned him a spot among the world's best. But in a brutal, heart-stopping moment, he was thrown violently to the dirt. Before he could react, Hard Times came crashing down, its full weight crushing his chest. The crowd gasped as Mason staggered to his feet, clutching his chest in agony. Then he collapsed. Silence fell over the arena. Medical staff rushed to his side, desperately working to stabilize him as he was rushed to Denver Health Medical Center. But the damage was too severe. Despite wearing a protective vest, the sheer force of the impact had shattered his ribs and caused catastrophic damage to his heart and aorta. That night, Mason Lowe, one of the brightest stars in professional bull riding, was gone. His death sent shockwaves through the PBR community. The following night, riders took to the arena with memorial patches sewn onto their vests, a solemn tribute to their fallen brother. Sean Gleason, PBR's CEO, spoke for everyone when he said, "The loss of Mason is devastating to us all. Our thoughts, prayers, and deepest condolences are with his family and wife, Abby." Despite the tragedy, Hard Times was kept in competition, with officials stating that the bull had no intention of causing harm. But for those who witnessed Mason's final ride, the moment was forever etched into their memories. Mason's legacy lived on. His funeral service, held on January 23, 2019, in his hometown of Boonville, Missouri, was attended by hundreds of mourners. That season, PBR renamed their annual event in St. Louis, Missouri, the Mason Lowe Memorial, ensuring his name would never be forgotten. Mason Lowe rode with passion, fearlessness, and heart, and though his life ended far too soon, his story remains a reminder of the unforgiving nature of the sport he loved and the unbreakable spirit of a cowboy who gave everything for it. It was 1995 in Las Vegas, a night that would go down in rodeo history for all the wrong reasons. Inside the MGM Grand, the energy crackled with anticipation. Thousands of fans packed the arena, waiting to witness a battle between man and beast. But they had no idea they were about to see one of the most terrifying moments the sport had ever known. Tuff Hedeman, a name that struck both respect and awe in the rodeo world, was at the peak of his career. A three-time world champion, fearless and relentless, he had faced the toughest bulls and always found a way to come out on top. But this night, his opponent wasn't just any bull, it was Bodacious. The name alone sent chills down the spine of every bull rider. Bodacious was no ordinary animal, he was a monster, a living nightmare wrapped in muscle and fury. Nicknamed the world's most dangerous bull, he was notorious for his explosive power and a deadly trick up his sleeve. Instead of just bucking riders off, Bodacious had mastered a devastating move, launching them forward, only to whip his massive head up at the last second, slamming his skull into their faces with bone-shattering force. No rider had ever walked away from him unscathed. Tuff knew what he was up against. He had drawn Bodacious in the short go-round, and the entire arena buzzed with nervous excitement. They knew this was more than just a ride, it was a showdown. A war between an unstoppable cowboy and an untamed beast. As Hedeman climbed onto the bull, gripping his rope tightly, he leaned forward, trying to stay ahead of Bodacious's lethal moves. The chute gate burst open, and then disaster. Bodacious exploded out, twisting violently, and before Hedeman could react, the bull snapped his head up with horrifying precision. The impact was brutal. A sickening crack echoed through the arena as Bodacious's skull slammed into Hedeman's face. The crowd gasped. Some screamed. Others stood frozen in shock. Hedeman crumpled to the dirt. Blood poured from his face, pooling beneath him. The sheer force of the hit had obliterated nearly every bone in his face. His cheekbones were shattered, his nose broken, his jaw barely holding together. And yet, in a moment that defied all logic, Hedeman did the unthinkable. He stood up. His face was a mess of blood and agony, his vision blurred, but pure adrenaline carried him forward. He refused to be carried out. Instead, he walked out of the arena on his own 2 feet. A warrior who had just survived an encounter with death itself. Only later, as he lay on a gurney, did the full extent of his injuries become clear. The doctors who examined him were stunned. At first, they thought he had been shot. His face required 2 grueling surgeries, 13 hours under the knife, and 6 titanium plates just to hold the bones together. The pain was unbearable, the recovery long and brutal. He lost 25 pounds, and when his young son Lane saw him, he didn't recognize his own father. Only the sound of his voice confirmed that the broken man before him was still Tough Hedeman. And yet, incredibly, this wasn't even his first brush with near death. In 1993, he had been temporarily paralyzed after a brutal fall at the National Finals Rodeo. That injury had cost him an entire season, but in 1995 he came roaring back, ranking 3rd in the world. Even after his face had been destroyed, he refused to quit. Just 6 weeks after his surgery, Hedeman was back in Las Vegas for the National Finals Rodeo. The pain was still fresh, but so was his determination. He rode 5 of the 10 bulls he faced, a feat that would have been impossible for anyone else. And then, in the 5th round, fate tested him once more. He drew Bodacious. The arena fell silent. Every eye was on him. Would he dare to climb on the bull that had nearly ended his life? As the chute opened, Bodacious charged out, alone. Hedeman had made his decision. He would not ride. The crowd erupted, not in disappointment, but in respect. They understood. They had seen the carnage, the brutality of what Bodacious could do, and they knew that sometimes even the toughest cowboys had to make the hardest choice. His story remains one of the most harrowing tales in rodeo history, a reminder of just how dangerous this sport can be, and just how tough some men truly are. Picture this. It's March 5th, 2019, in the sleepy little village of Z, tucked away in the eastern Czech Republic, the kind of place where the loudest sounds are a rooster crowing or a tractor puttering along. That is, until Michal Prek arrived. Michal wasn't your average villager. At 34, he had gained a reputation, and not in a good way. His hobby wasn't something simple like fishing or woodworking. No, he had a passion that made people question his sanity, keeping lions. Not just one, but 2, a male and a lioness. Why? No one knows. Maybe he watched The Lion King one too many times or just wanted to stand out. But owning these massive predators wasn't enough for him. He had bigger plans. He wanted to breed them. In his backyard, his enclosures, if you could even call them that, were more of a chaotic DIY project than a secure habitat. They were hastily thrown together, probably held up by sheer willpower. The problem? He had no permits. Authorities fined him, neighbors complained, yet Michal ignored them all. To him, these lions weren't just exotic pets, they were family. Big, 400-pound clawed and fanged family. But keeping lions wasn't his only eccentricity. He also walked them. Imagine strolling through a quiet village and seeing a man casually walking a lion on a leash like it's a golden retriever. What could possibly go wrong? Well, everything. One infamous incident involved a cyclist who collided with the lioness during one of these bizarre outings. He ended up in the hospital. Authorities, in an absurd twist, classified it as a traffic accident. For the villagers, however, it was just another terrifying reminder of the situation they were stuck in. Years passed with no resolution. The authorities wanted the lions removed, but legal loopholes and a lack of proper wildlife sanctuaries left them powerless. Meanwhile, Mikhail refused to cooperate. He blocked officials from accessing his property and stubbornly defended his lions. The villagers lived in constant fear, trapped in an unending standoff. Then came the morning of March 5th, 2019. At around 7 a.m., Mikhail's father made a horrifying discovery. His son's lifeless body was inside the male lion's cage. Even more disturbing, the door was locked from the inside. Why did Mikhail enter the enclosure? No one knows. What was clear was that authorities now had an even bigger problem. Mikhail's body was in a cage with two very alive, very dangerous lions. And here's the thing about lions. They're not oversized house cats. They are apex predators, built for the kill. No one was about to risk being the next victim. In the end, there was only one solution. Authorities had to shoot both lions to secure the scene. If that wasn't tragic enough, it was later discovered that the lioness was pregnant. Mikhail's shocking death put an abrupt end to his bizarre passion, but for the villagers it also brought relief. For years, they had lived in fear, unable to do anything about the man keeping deadly predators just beyond their fences. Now, at last, the nightmare was over. In the aftermath, the mayor of Z expressed hope that this tragedy would finally lead to stricter laws on keeping dangerous animals. And indeed, the Czech government began reassessing its wildlife regulations. The country had long been a hub for illegal wildlife smuggling, a reputation it could no longer afford to ignore. Mikhail Prek's story serves as a cautionary tale, a stark reminder of what happens when humans blur the lines between domesticity and the wild. Lions belong in the savannah, not in someone's backyard. On July 2nd, 2023, the Stoney Nakoda Rodeo in Alberta, Canada, was alive with excitement. Fans gathered under the summer sky, eager to witness the raw power and courage that defined bull riding's most fearless competitors. Among them was Seth Salteau, a 19-year-old sensation whose passion for the sport burned brighter than the arena lights. He had already made a name for himself, a three-time Indian National Finals Rodeo (INF) qualifier, a young warrior in the indigenous rodeo circuit, and a rising star with his sights set on the professional bull riders (PBR) tour. This was his moment. As he prepared to ride, the atmosphere was thick with anticipation. Seth had spent years training for nights like this. Inspired by his grandfather, Marcel Salteau, a legendary bull rider in his own right, Seth had embraced the sport with fearless determination since the age of 14. He knew the risks. He welcomed the challenge. Then the chute burst open. The bull erupted into the arena, kicking, twisting, thrashing with violent force. Seth held on with every ounce of strength and skill he had honed over the years. The crowd roared, their cheers blending with the deep, thunderous breaths of the beast beneath him. But in a split second, the ride took a devastating turn. He was thrown. The impact was brutal. The arena, once alive with energy, fell eerily silent as Seth lay motionless in the dirt. Medical teams rushed in. Fans held their breath. Despite his protective headgear, despite the safety measures in place, the injuries were catastrophic. The fight was over before it even began. Seth Salteau had taken his last ride. Word spread like wildfire. The rodeo world was shattered. How could a life so full of promise be cut short in an instant? How could a cowboy who had already conquered so much be gone before reaching his prime? He had dreams of standing on the grandest stages, proving that indigenous riders belonged among the best in the world. He had an undeniable presence, a charm that could light up any room, and a heart that beat only for the sport he loved. Now, his name would be spoken not in celebration, but in grief. In the days that followed, tributes poured in from across North America. Competitors, fans, and family members mourned the loss of a young man whose journey was only just beginning. But in every whispered memory, in every retelling of his greatest rides, Seth Salto's legacy refused to fade. He may have left this world too soon, but his story will live on, etched into the soul of the sport he loved, forever remembered as the fearless cowboy who dared to chase the impossible. On March 24, 2000, under the bright lights of the arena in Albuquerque, New Mexico, the air was electric with anticipation. The Professional Bull Riders Bud Light Cup Series was in full swing, a brutal clash between the world's best cowboys and the fiercest bulls ever bred. Among those who stepped into the ring that night was Glenn Keeley, a 30-year-old Canadian bull rider from Alberta. He wasn't just another competitor, he was one of the best, ranked 9th in the world by points and 6th by earnings. With over a decade of experience, Glenn was at the height of his career, chasing greatness one 8-second ride at a time. But on this night, fate had placed him against Promised Land, a force of nature disguised as a bull. Promised Land was no ordinary opponent. The 1999 PBR Bull of the Year, he was a terrifying blend of power and unpredictability, a 2,000-pound juggernaut with no mercy for any man who dared mount him. Countless riders had failed to last against him, sent flying in mere seconds. But Glenn wasn't one to back down. He had faced dangerous bulls before. He was ready. The arena fell into a tense hush as Glenn settled onto the beast's back, his grip tightening around the bull rope. The gate exploded open, and chaos erupted. Promised Land launched forward like a cannonball, bucking violently, twisting mid-air, throwing his full weight into the fight. Glenn held on, muscles straining, his body moving with the bull's erratic movements. The seconds stretched, 4, 5, 6, until suddenly, with a savage twist, Promised Land sent him flying. Glenn crashed hard into the dirt, the impact jarring but not unfamiliar. He had taken countless falls before. He tried to roll away, to get back to his feet, but there was no time. Promised Land's massive hind legs came down like a sledgehammer, crushing Glenn's chest. A gasp swept through the crowd. The moment hung in the air, heavy and unbearable. Glenn lay still. Then, against all odds, he moved. The audience erupted in stunned relief as Glenn, battered and broken, somehow stood up. Assisted by the medical team, he walked out of the arena, even managing a joke with the staff. To those watching, it looked like just another brutal fall, another close call for a tough-as-nails cowboy. But behind the scenes, something was terribly wrong. By the time Glenn reached the University of New Mexico Hospital, the situation had turned dire. He had suffered devastating internal injuries. His liver was lacerated, his body fighting a losing battle against the damage. At first, his vitals remained stable, offering a fleeting glimmer of hope. But as doctors rushed him into surgery, the horrifying truth became clear. The damage was far worse than anyone had realized. The bleeding was uncontrollable. Before the clock struck 10 p.m., Glenn Keeley was gone. The news spread like wildfire. A man in his prime, a cowboy chasing his dreams, was suddenly no more. It was the first high-profile bull riding death in North America in 6 years, a grim reminder of the unforgiving nature of the sport. Glenn's family knew these risks all too well. Years earlier, his brother Jason had been gored by a bull, left in a coma for 2 weeks, and yet Glenn had never hesitated. Bull riding wasn't just a sport for him. It was his purpose, his passion, his legacy. He had made a promise, to himself, to his family, that 2000 would be his final year in competition. He was planning to walk away. But on that night in Albuquerque, Glenn Keeley rode one last time. The rodeo continued the next day, but the atmosphere had changed. The riders wore memorial stickers on their vests, a silent tribute to the fallen cowboy, a press conference was held addressing the tragic accident. Dr. Tandy Freeman, who had treated Glenn, delivered the devastating truth. His vitals were stable until surgeons saw the extent of the damage. By then, it was too late. He bled to death before they could save him. But Glenn's name was not forgotten. Today, his legacy endures. The Glenn Keely Memorial Bull Riding event was established in his honor, alongside a scholarship fund to help young athletes chase their dreams. Every year, at the PBR World Finals, the best Canadian bull rider receives the Glenn Keely Award, ensuring that his courage, resilience, and fighting spirit live on. Because Glenn Keely wasn't just a cowboy, he was a legend. In the summer of 2011, a group of British teenagers set off on what was supposed to be the adventure of a lifetime, an epic, month-long Arctic expedition in the frozen wilderness of Svalbard, Norway. Organized by the British Schools Exploring Society, BSES, this trip promised a thrilling mix of science, survival, and snow. The teens were eager to witness the majestic polar bear in its natural habitat, study the effects of climate change, and make unforgettable memories. Unfortunately, what started as an awe-inspiring expedition quickly spiraled into a nightmare, one that tragically cost the life of 17-year-old Horatio Chappell, a bright young man with dreams of becoming a doctor. The group, consisting of 80 students, arrived in Svalbard filled with excitement. They were reassured by the trip organizers that strict safety measures were in place to keep them protected in one of the world's most extreme environments. Tripwires equipped with small explosive mines were set up around their campsite to deter wildlife, pen flares were on hand to scare off any unwanted visitors, and an adult leader carried a firearm, just in case. But as it turned out, those safety precautions weren't quite as foolproof as they seemed. Shortly after setting up camp, the group discovered some major problems with their equipment. First, there weren't enough pen flares to go around, leaving many students without a crucial line of defense. Then, they realized that some of the tripwires, the ones meant to detect and scare away approaching bears, were either faulty or improperly set up. To top it off, the group leader's firearm wasn't exactly modern. It was an old rifle, far from ideal for a life-or-death emergency. And then, in the early hours of August 5th, the worst-case scenario became a horrifying reality. A starving polar bear, likely struggling to find food due to the rapidly changing Arctic ecosystem, wandered into the campsite. Driven by desperation, it ignored its usual instinct to avoid humans, and instead saw an easy meal. The bear entered the camp undetected, creeping toward the tents where the teenagers were fast asleep. Then, all hell broke loose. The bear tore into Horatio's tent, launching a frenzied attack. One of his companions was bitten on the head before the bear turned its focus on Horatio. In the chaos, Horatio was dragged from the tent and brutally mauled, while his terrified friends scrambled for safety. The entire camp erupted in panic. Screams echoed across the icy landscape as the bear continued its rampage, injuring 4 other members of the expedition, including 2 adult leaders who desperately tried to stop the attack. But their outdated rifle wasn't exactly cooperating. They struggled to fire, desperately trying to take down the beast. After a tense and terrifying struggle, they finally managed to shoot and kill the bear, but it was too late. Horatio was gone. The news of the tragedy sent shockwaves across the world, raising serious questions about the safety protocols of such high-risk expeditions. A trip designed to inspire and educate had instead exposed the fatal consequences of poor planning. Faulty equipment, insufficient training, and an unreliable firearm had left the group vulnerable to one of nature's most powerful predators. For Horatio's family and friends, the loss was unimaginable. He was a bright, compassionate young man on the verge of adulthood, eager to make a difference in the world. His death became a heartbreaking reminder of the unpredictability of nature and the immense responsibility required when venturing into its domain. Horatio's story remains a chilling chapter in the history of exploration, a reminder that while the wilderness is breathtakingly beautiful, it is also ruthlessly unforgiving. Those who knew him continue to honor his memory, remembering his adventurous spirit and love for discovery. On December 11, 1994, the Thomas and Mack Center in Las Vegas, Nevada was electric. It was the final night of the National Finals Rodeo, NFR, and the world's best bull riders had gathered for one last showdown. Among them was Brent Thurman, a 25-year-old rising star whose name was already etched into the sport's history. Thurman wasn't just another cowboy chasing glory. He was a force to be reckoned with. A founding member of the Professional Bull Riders, PBR, he had carved out his legacy on the back of the fiercest bulls in the sport. But on this night, fate had a different plan. As Thurman prepared for his ride, something felt different. Normally calm and collected, he turned to fellow rider Aaron Samas, who had faced the same bull earlier in the competition. "What do you think of Red Wolf?" he asked, his voice carrying an uncharacteristic edge of uncertainty. The chute opened. Red Wolf erupted from the gate with bone-rattling force. Thurman gripped tight, his body moving instinctively with the beast's violent twists and kicks. 4 seconds in, the crowd roared. 5 seconds, he was still holding strong. But then, disaster struck. He was bucked off. Most riders know how to take a fall. But this wasn't just a fall. Somehow, Thurman's hand tangled in his bull rope. A deadly mistake. The bull dragged him beneath its raging hooves, and in an instant, 2,000 pounds of fury came crashing down onto the back of his head and neck. The arena fell silent as Thurman hit the dirt, his body unmoving. For a brief moment, he lifted his head, a flicker of life, a fight to stay conscious. But then, his body went still. The Justin Sports medicine team rushed in, their faces tight with urgency. EMTs loaded him onto a stretcher, racing to University Medical Center. But the damage was done. Severe cranial and facial fractures. Brent Thurman never woke up. 6 days later, on December 17, 1994, the rodeo world received the news it had feared. Brent Thurman was gone. The aftermath was one of shock, grief, and an eerie sense of disbelief. How could this happen? Red Wolf had never been known as a particularly aggressive bull. The death was ruled a freak accident, but for those who had seen it firsthand, it was a nightmare that would never fade. His funeral, held at the Travis County Exposition Center in Austin, Texas, was a solemn gathering of family, friends, and fellow riders who struggled to comprehend the loss of a man who had seemed invincible. But legends never truly die. In the years that followed, Thurman's name would become synonymous with courage, determination, and the unbreakable spirit of a cowboy. In 1996, the PBR introduced the Lane Frost Brent Thurman Award, given to the rider with the highest scoring ride at the World Finals, ensuring that his legacy lived on alongside another fallen legend. From 1999 to 2017, the Brent Thurman Memorial Bull Riding event raised money for charity, honoring his memory in the sport he loved. In 2002, he was posthumously inducted into the Texas Rodeo Cowboy Hall of Fame. In 2011, he joined the PBR Ring of Honor, solidifying his place among the greatest to ever take the ride. Las Vegas even paid tribute, naming a frontage road after him, Brent Thurman Way. Today, the Brent Thurman Foundation continues to serve special needs communities in Austin, Texas, carrying forward his spirit of generosity and strength. Though Red Wolf's career continued until his retirement in 2000 and his death in 2006, the memory of that fateful night in 1994 never faded. Brent Thurman's ride may have ended too soon, but his story, his impact, will forever be a part of rodeo history. It was July 30th, 1989, a day that would forever be etched into rodeo history. The Cheyenne Frontier Days finals were in full swing, the crowd roaring with anticipation as one of the sport's brightest stars prepared for his next ride. Lane Frost, just 25 years old, was already a legend, a world champion bull rider with a fearless spirit, a magnetic personality, and a future that seemed limitless. But no one in that arena could have known they were about to witness his final ride. Lane was born on October 12, 1963, in Lane, Oklahoma, raised in the heart of rodeo country. His father, Clyde, was a cowboy, but young Lane didn't take to the sport immediately. Something changed along the way, though. And once the fire was lit, there was no stopping him. By the late 80s, he had become one of the most electrifying names in rodeo. In 1987, he reached the peak of his career, winning the World Championship. The following year, he accomplished the impossible, conquering Red Rock, a bull that had never been successfully ridden for the full 8 seconds. Lane wasn't just a competitor. He was an icon, a hero to fans, and a friend to his fellow riders. But fate had other plans. That July day in 1989, the Wyoming sky hung heavy and gray, the air thick with the scent of damp dirt. Lane was up against a powerful, unpredictable bull named Taking Care of Business. As the gate flew open, Lane held firm, riding with the same unshakable confidence that had made him a champion. The crowd erupted as he made the 8-second mark, earning an impressive 85 points. But in rodeo, the danger doesn't end with the whistle. As Lane dismounted, disaster struck. He landed awkwardly in front of the bull. In a split second, the beast lunged forward, its horn striking Lane's ribs with devastating force. He stumbled, tried to regain his footing, then collapsed face first into the Wyoming dirt. The arena fell into a stunned silence. Dr. Skip Ross, the first responder, rushed to his side, but the injuries were catastrophic. A broken rib had punctured Lane's heart. For 90 desperate minutes, medical personnel fought to save him, but it was too late. Lane Frost, the cowboy who had stared down death time and time again, was gone. His death sent shockwaves through the rodeo world. His closest friends, including Cody Lambert and Tuff Hedeman, were devastated. Determined to honor his friend's memory, Cody created something that would change the sport forever. The protective vest that is now a standard in bull riding, a life-saving innovation born from tragedy. But Lane's legacy didn't end there. His story inspired a new generation of riders. J.B. Mauney, one of the greatest bull riders of all time, has often credited Lane as one of his biggest influences. His life was immortalized in the 1994 film 8 Seconds, with Luke Perry bringing his story to the big screen and introducing his legend to an even wider audience. For those who were there that day, for those who heard the gasp of the crowd and watched a legend fall, the memory of Lane Frost will never fade. His story is one of triumph and tragedy, of a man who lived fearlessly and rode until the very end. And in the heart of every bull rider who steps into the arena, Lane still rides on. A split-second decision, a predator lurking in the shadows, a family outing turned into a nightmare. On a scorching July day in 2016, what was supposed to be an exciting trip to Beijing's Battling Wildlife Park became the stuff of horror movies. This park, famous for its drive-through safari, lets visitors see majestic Siberian tigers up close, all from the supposed safety of their cars. But as it turns out, supposed safety only applies if you follow the rules. One tiny lapse, one moment of carelessness, and suddenly you're no longer a spectator. You're on the menu. It all started with a heated argument inside a car. Tensions were rising between a woman named Xiao and her family. Frustrated and likely wanting to make a point, she did something no one could have imagined. She opened the car door. Yes, in the middle of a tiger enclosure. Maybe she thought she was just stepping out for a breath of fresh air. Maybe she wasn't thinking at all. But the thing about tigers, they don't do timeouts. Before she could even process her mistake, the jungle came alive. From the shadows, a massive Siberian tiger launched itself at her with terrifying speed. In a flash, the 400-pound predator clamped its jaws onto her and began dragging her away. Screams erupted. Panic exploded inside the vehicle. Her family, frozen in horror, had only seconds to react. That's when Xiao's mother, in a desperate act of heroism, did what any mother would do. She ran straight toward the danger. But nature is ruthless. A second tiger, bigger, faster, and even more ferocious than the first, attacked. The impact was brutal. The beast took her down with a force so powerful it sent shivers through anyone who watched the footage later. She had no chance. Unlike Xiao, she wouldn't make it out alive. Every horrifying second was caught on security cameras. The footage, which eventually leaked online, left the world in shock. Viewers watched in horror as the tigers disappeared into the underbrush with their victims. By the time park officials and emergency responders arrived, the nightmare was over. Xiao, incredibly, survived. Severely injured, but alive. Her mother, tragically, did not. Her courageous attempt to save her daughter had cost her everything. The incident sparked immediate outrage and a flood of questions. The park had clear rules. Stay inside your vehicle, keep the windows up, lock the doors. Yet, Xiao later claimed she had no idea what she had signed before entering. According to her, she thought it was just a standard form, not a serious waiver warning about the lurking danger. Making matters worse, she accused the park of failing to respond in time. She insisted a park official in a nearby vehicle should have stepped in to help. That accusation sent shockwaves through China, with many pointing fingers at both the park's security measures and Xiao's own reckless mistake. But the real lesson? Mother Nature doesn't care about misunderstandings. Siberian tigers are apex predators. They're designed to hunt, overpower, and kill prey much larger than themselves. Once they lock onto a target, there's no reasoning, no mercy, only raw, primal instinct. A single misstep, a fatal moment of misjudgment, a mother who sacrificed herself in the ultimate act of love. Today, the tiger enclosure at Badaling Wildlife Park remains open, but those who visit now do so with a renewed sense of caution, because if this tragedy proved anything, it's that in the wild, the rules aren't suggestions. And one wrong move, that's the difference between watching the tigers and becoming the main event. On March the 24th, 2000, the lights shone down on the arena in Albuquerque, New Mexico. The air was thick with excitement as the professional bull riders' Bud Light Cup Series continued, showcasing the toughest men against the meanest bulls. Among them was Glenn Keeley, a 30-year-old Canadian cowboy from Alberta, a rider at the peak of his career. He wasn't just good, he was one of the best, ranked 9th in the world by points and 6th by earnings. He was chasing greatness, one ride at a time. That night, he was set to face a beast unlike any other, Promised Land, a monstrous bull that had been named the 1999 PBR Bull of the Year. This animal wasn't just strong, it was unpredictable, violent, and nearly impossible to conquer. Weighing nearly as much as a small car, Promised Land had no mercy for any rider daring enough to take him on. But Glenn was undeterred. He had spent over a decade mastering the art of bull riding, and tonight he was determined to climb even higher in the rankings. The arena was electric as Glenn settled onto the bull's back, gripping the rope tightly. The seconds stretched before the chute flew open, and then all hell broke loose. Promised Land exploded out of the gate like a missile, twisting, bucking, throwing his full power into dislodging the rider on his back. Glenn held on with every ounce of strength he had, battling for control, fighting for those crucial 8 seconds. But the bull was relentless. A sudden, brutal twist sent Glenn airborne, slamming him into the dirt. The crowd gasped, but Glenn had been thrown before. He knew how to take a fall. He tried to move, but in the blink of an eye, Promised Land's massive hind legs came crashing down onto his chest. A sickening silence fell over the crowd. For a moment, Glenn lay still in the dirt, the brutal impact having crushed his body. Then, miraculously, he stirred. Against all odds, he managed to stand, walking off the arena with help from the medical team. He even joked with the staff, brushing off concerns. To the stunned audience, it seemed like another close call. He was tough, he was going to be okay. But behind the scenes, something was terribly wrong. By the time Glenn reached the University of New Mexico Hospital, the severity of his injuries became horrifyingly clear. He had suffered massive internal damage, including a lacerated liver. His condition deteriorated rapidly. Doctors fought desperately to save him, but the bleeding was unstoppable. Before 10 p.m. that night, Glenn Keely took his final breath. The news sent shockwaves through the bull riding world. A man at the top of his game, a cowboy who had risked it all, was suddenly gone. It was the first high-profile bull riding death in North America in 6 years. The risk had always been there, lurking behind every gate, in every unpredictable movement of a 2,000-pound beast. But Glenn's passing was a painful reminder of how quickly a dream can turn into a nightmare. His family knew these dangers all too well. Years earlier, Glenn's brother Jason had been gored by a bull and left in a coma for 2 weeks. But Glenn never wavered. Bull riding was in his blood. He had made a promise to himself, to his family, that he would compete for just 1 more year. That year was 2000, and that fateful night in Albuquerque was his last ride. The rodeo didn't stop the next day, but it wasn't the same. Cowboys wore memorial stickers on their vests, and a press conference was held, addressing the tragedy that had rocked the sport. Dr. Tandy Freeman, who treated Glenn, revealed the devastating truth. His vitals were stable until surgeons saw the extent of the damage. By then, it was too late. He bled to death before they could save him. Months later, at the 2000 PBR World Finals, Glenn's legacy was honored with a heartfelt tribute. He had been on track for one of his best seasons ever, earning nearly $34,000 that year. His name would never be forgotten. Today, Glenn's memory lives on. The Glenn Keely Memorial Bull Riding event and a scholarship fund were created in his honor. Every year, at the PBR World Finals, a Canadian cowboy is awarded the Glenn Keely Award, ensuring that his legacy of courage and determination continues. It was July 24, 2007, in Salt Lake City, Utah. The air was thick with anticipation as the days of 47 Rodeo, one of the most prestigious events in the country, was in full swing. Among the riders that night was 19-year-old Tag Elliott, a rising star from Thatcher, Utah. At just 19, he had already made a name for himself. The 2006 Utah High School Rodeo champion, the second-place finisher at the National College Rodeo Finals, and now ranked 24th in the world as a professional. This ride wasn't just another challenge. It was an opportunity to climb higher, to prove he belonged with the best. But fate had other plans. Tag had drawn Werewolf, a fitting name for a bull that was more monster than beast. A hulking, 1,500-pound force of pure aggression, known for unpredictable movements and a vicious streak that sent even seasoned riders crashing to the dirt. This wasn't just a test of skill, it was survival. The tension in the arena was suffocating as Tag climbed onto Werewolf's back, gripping the bull rope with the confidence of a man who had spent years chasing this very moment. The seconds dragged, the crowd fell silent, and then the chute blasted open. Werewolf erupted into the arena like an unleashed demon, kicking and twisting with raw, uncontainable fury. Tag barely had time to react before, crack, a sickening impact. Werewolf's horn struck Tag with unrelenting force, smashing into the right side of his face. The blow was devastating. His eye socket shattered. His jaw snapped like brittle wood. Teeth flew from his mouth as his body went limp, unconscious before he even hit the ground. The crowd's roar turned into a horrified silence. For an agonizing moment, Tag lay motionless in the dirt. No movement, no sign of life. The rodeo clowns sprinted in, forming a protective shield around him, waving frantically to distract the raging bull. Other cowboys rushed in, eyes wide with fear, because they knew. They had seen bad wrecks before, but this was different. In the stands, a man bolted from his seat. Chris Haim, an off-duty ambulance driver, had seen enough injuries to recognize a life-threatening situation. His instincts took over. He ran for the arena, yelling for the paramedics to bring the ambulance closer. Every second counted. Tag was rushed to LDS Hospital, his condition growing worse with every mile. The damage was beyond anything the doctors had anticipated. Every bone on the right side of his face was broken. His jaw and eye socket were obliterated. Most of his teeth were gone. And during emergency surgery, the nightmare worsened. Tag's heart stopped. Twice, doctors fought to bring him back. Twice, he hovered on the brink of death. For days, he drifted between unconsciousness and unbearable pain. He had no memory of the accident, no recollection of the moment his world changed forever. When he finally opened his eyes, reality came crashing down. His face was shattered, his body weak, his career hanging by a thread. The road ahead was brutal. 20 months, more than 20 surgeries. The doctors rebuilt his face piece by piece, but nothing could heal the deeper wounds, the doubts, the whispers that maybe, just maybe, this was the end of his bull riding days. But giving up, that was never an option. "This is my job. This is how I make a living," Tag said, his voice unwavering. He wasn't searching for a way out. He was waiting for one thing, the green light to ride again. His family never pressured him, never asked him to walk away. They stood by him through every surgery, every grueling day of recovery, every moment of pain. And when the time came, when the doctors finally cleared him to return to the sport that nearly took his life, Tag did the only thing he knew how to do. He got back on the bull. By 2009, he cautiously re-entered competition, determined to reclaim his place among the elite. He trained relentlessly, pushing his body beyond its limits, proving to himself and the world that he was still the cowboy he had always been. Even after an arm injury later slowed him down, Tag remained tied to the rodeo world, working on his ranch in Idaho, still a cowboy at heart. Imagine you're on a road trip, taking in the breathtaking beauty of British Columbia, when you stumble upon the Liard River Hot Springs Provincial Park, a hidden gem tucked away in the boreal forest. It's the perfect spot to unwind in nature's very own hot tub. But for one unlucky family, what was supposed to be a peaceful pit stop turned into a real-life horror movie. On August 14, 1997, Patty McConnell, a Texas mom road-tripping to Alaska with her kids, decided to take a much-needed break at the hot springs. The scenery was stunning, the water was warm, and the vibe was all about relaxation. Wanting to escape the crowds, Patty and her 13-year-old son Kelly wandered down a boardwalk, climbed a set of stairs, and found a quieter pool. Everything was perfect until it wasn't. Out of nowhere, a rustling in the bushes shattered the peace. Patty turned, and there it was, a massive black bear staring right at her. Before she could even react, the bear charged. In an instant, it tackled Patty, sinking its claws and teeth into her. Her terrified screams echoed through the forest as she fought for her life. Now, most 13-year-olds would probably freeze in terror, but not Kelly. This kid was made of pure courage. Grabbing the nearest tree branch, he started whacking the bear with everything he had. When that didn't work, he even kicked the bear in the face, a move that was as bold as it was risky. But the bear, furious and relentless, turned its attention to Kelly. With one powerful swipe, it clawed his neck, grabbed him by the waist, and hurled him to the ground like a rag doll. The chaos caught the attention of other visitors, including Ray Kitchen, a man who didn't hesitate to jump in and try to save the family. He fought with everything he had, but the bear's sheer strength was too much. In the struggle, the bear knocked Ray off the boardwalk, sending both of them tumbling down a hillside. Tragically, Ray didn't make it. The bear delivered fatal wounds to his neck, taking his life in the process. As panic spread through the park, another man tried to help and was critically injured in the attempt. It wasn't until two bystanders arrived with hunting rifles that the nightmare finally ended. They shot and killed the bear, but by then, the damage was done. Patty, despite her valiant effort to protect her son, didn't survive. Her bravery, however, was undeniable. Her final moments were spent fighting for Kelly. Miraculously, Kelly survived, though severely injured. His determination to battle a full-grown black bear and his incredible will to live turned him into a real-life legend. As for Ray Kitchen, his selflessness left a deep impact on everyone who heard his story. He ran toward danger without a second thought, an act of true heroism that cost him his life but saved others. The attack sent shockwaves through the region, sparking conversations about wildlife safety and the unpredictable dangers of nature. Wildlife officials later determined that the bear was emaciated and unusually aggressive, likely attacking out of pure desperation due to hunger or illness. Today, the Liard River Hot Springs is still a beloved destination, but the events of that tragic day haven't been forgotten. Warning signs about bear activity now stand as stark reminders of what happened, urging visitors to stay alert and respect the wild. Nature may be beautiful, but it doesn't play by our rules, and sometimes even the most peaceful oasis can turn into a battleground in the blink of an eye.